Hey, how's it going? Mike from LI Flies Mike. And today we're going to be tying a variation of the Clouser minnow called the Adachi Clouser by Steve Adachi. As always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below, but today we're going to be using an eagle claw jig hook, a 413, though there are various different types of jig hooks you can use with different degree bends in them. I like the 60-degree bends, but they're 45-degree as well, so try different jig hooks and see which ones you like best. But I'm using the Eagle Claw 413 today in a size 1. Now we're going to be using some Dumbell Eyes here, and we're just going to affix these using the classic figure 8 pattern. What I find is it also helps to kind of wrap the eyes in front and behind, and then you can also take your thread and wrap underneath, kind of going almost completely circular around the thread, and that'll tighten it up around the base. This will just ensure that the Dumbell Eyes are nice and secure. Now this is a variation of the classic Clouser minnow using synthetic materials, and we're going to be incorporating a flash tail. And we're going to be using some Magnum Flashabou here for the flash tail section of the fly. So taking a healthy amount of Magnum Flashabou here, we're going to tie this in off the back. And we're going to use a pretty healthy amount. Not only is Magnum Flashabou wider and stronger than classic Flashabou, but it's going to give us this nice pronounced flash tail to the fly. One definitive feature about this fly that Steve Adachi uses with tying this particular version of the Clouser is he applies epoxy or UV resin essentially after every single tie. So this is going to make the fly extremely durable. So you can see here we're just going to take a small amount of resin. What you could do is you could take your thread, you could whip finish off. I'm just going to move my thread forward every time that I'm going to apply resin, and that way we can just help expedite the process and not have to cut off and retie every time. So just taking the resin here and spraying it around 360 degrees around the thread wrapping for the Magnum Flashabou. We can move our thread slightly forward, and now we can go ahead and start tying the body section of the fly. So from here on out, we're pretty much just going to be using Steve Farrar fiber. You could always use Slinky fiber, and there's some other synthetics that we've covered in our hour-long synthetic fly tying material video that could be substitutes as well. But I'm going to be using Slinky fiber here, and I'm essentially just going to be V-tying it. We're essentially just doubling over the material because we're working with it in a very narrow manner. I'm not trying to build a super wide 3D profile. But so we're essentially just doubling over the material, but I'm just using a V-tie here to make it a little bit easier. By using the V-tie here, I can kind of spread the material on either side, but still focusing it top and bottom. So we're just going to take our material here and tie this on using white for the belly section. I'm actually using some gray here because I don't have a ton of white, but it's close enough. And using some chartreuse for the top. You can feel free to mix and match the colors and use whatever sort of color patterns you like. And when I went back to fold the material, I saw that it was quite long and we were covering up our flash tail. So I actually trimmed it, and the nice thing about Steve Farrar fiber is you can kind of just pull on the ends to taper it. So now we can fold it back and tie it, again trying to focus our material mostly top and bottom here with our V-ties. And you'll see here in a second that you want that flash tail to be pronounced and at least sticking about like an inch, if not more, outside the back of the material, the rest of the body section. It's going to help give us some great action in the rear of the fly. So again, with every step as we move forward, we're going to apply UV resin here. And again, I'm using Solarez medium UV resin. You could use the thick resin as well, even the thin. I like the medium because it's a nice in-between in terms of the viscosity. So it's pretty easy to use and work with. So after curing the resin, again, we're just going to move our thread forward. And again, keep the material pretty sparse. Again, in that synthetic video that I talked about, and most of the videos where I use synthetic material, it's pretty important to try and use the least amount of material you can while building up your profile of the fly. So we're going to keep it very sparse here when we're tying our material on. Again, it's very easy to add too much here. So using some gray on the belly section and using some chartreuse on the top here. We used the lighter yellow to begin with in our first section, and now I'm starting to go with darker colors progressively on the top as we move forward. You can see here I'm thinning out the material a little bit because it is quite easy to add too much material when working with synthetics. So it's just something to be mindful of and think about when you're working with this sort of stuff. And what we can do is by tapering the length of the material as we start moving forward, we can also reduce the need to essentially trim the fly. I like keeping the material longer in the rear, and then we can start tapering it down as we move forward. But for the first couple collars or sections, we can keep it fairly long. So again, applying UV resin here and making sure you coat all of the threads. You can see you don't really need to coat much of it or a very large area, so you can just move your thread slightly forward, apply some resin, and then hit it with the light. So now after our two body sections here, I'm going to move forward towards the front section of the fly, and we're going to wrap right in front of the dumbbell eyes. Now, just like a classic clouser, we're going to fold this back over the eyes and tie on top. You could do this essentially in one section pulling the materials, but I'm just going to tie one side first, and then I can go ahead and fold this back. First adding some more material so I can make sure that the belly section is going to be nice and full. We're essentially just folding it back, like doubling it over. It's kind of like a mix between V-tying and kind of doing like a half hollow, if you will. Cleaning up some of the rogue materials here because I tapered down some of the lengths and I didn't pull out some of the shorter hair, so it helps to pull out the shorter material so you don't have to deal with stuff like that. So now we have the belly section finished. We can go ahead and move our thread forward and we can tie our wind material on top here. Again, first we always need to coat all of our thread wrappings in UV resin. And that's no different for this section, so I'm going to go ahead and quickly coat this and then hit it with a light. And one thing that sets this fly apart is using UV resin or epoxy at every single step will make the fly extremely durable. You don't necessarily need to do that for most of your fly tying for striped bass, but if you want your flies to be rock solid, this is one way of doing it. So now we can go ahead and take some dark brown here. And recently I've been liking the dark brown or dark tan color over the chartreuse, and it turns out to be a really nice color combination. So we're going to do that here. And after folding that back, we can go ahead and then take a small amount of black here of the Steve Farrar fiber mix. And it has some nice blue and red flash mixed in. I can go ahead and fold this back as well. And this will give us that nice dark backing to the fly, which you see in a lot of bait fish. So just be mindful of any shorter hairs to make sure I fold these back here, and we can go ahead and double this over. One thing I've learned with working with Steve Farrar fiber and using V-ties or just doubling over in this sort of manner is the least amount of thread wrappings, the better. So make sure you use nice tight thread wrappings and secure down the material tightly. Now you can see how the colors kind of progressively get darker as we move forward on top, giving us that nice natural baitfish look. Again, you can see we left our ties quite sparse as well, and we developed a very nice full body profile. So as you can see, it's very easy to add too much material when working with a fly like this. So it's, again, just something to be mindful of. So now we can go ahead and take our thread here and whip finish and then cut this off. And of course, if we applied UV resin or epoxy to every other section of the fly, we're going to do it to the thread section at the front here. So we're going to go ahead and apply some UV resin, spread this around thoroughly, and then hit it with the light. And again, less is more with resin, so I'd rather build up 2 coats as opposed to apply too much in the first place and have it be hard to work with. Now, one tip with the UV light here is try not to get the light too close, and also try not to keep it focused in one area for too long, because what will happen is the resin has a tendency to overheat, and certain resins in particular more so will potentially turn yellow from overheating. I believe it's a side effect of heating up, so it's something you need to be mindful of, and just keep moving the fly around as you cure it. Now you can see here the head was a little bit thin, so I just want to apply another thin coat of resin just to kind of help fill it in and give us that nice front section and help build up the profile on the head of the fly to match the rest of it. Well, and there we go. That's the Adachi Clouser, a very interesting variation on the Clouser minnow. I've seen various flies like this throughout the years in some of Lefty Kray's older books, for instance, but the addition of using UV resin at every tie and the flash tail off the back, similar to either some of Blanton's flies or Sadati's flies, makes this a great fly to have in your fly box for striped bass and for other species as well. I'm sure this would be great for a ton of freshwater species as well as other saltwater game fish. I'm particularly fond of flash tails in flies. It's a very simple thing that you can do, or if you don't have nice saddle hackle, you can omit the saddle hackle and just use a flash tail instead. One reason you would tie this variation of a clouser is you can build up a larger body section. You can essentially build up a larger profile in general, so you can imitate different types of bait fish. The synthetic material is quite durable, and it also reacts differently to natural materials. We've talked about this in other videos, but bucktail, for instance, has a tendency to sink slower than synthetics do, for instance. So it's just something to think about when you're tying these flies. And even though it's mostly comprised of synthetic materials, it does have some pretty good action in the water, thanks in part mostly due to the flash tail off the rear. That's one of the main dominant features of a flash tail fly, is that it's going to have that fantastic action in the rear, and it's certainly going to get a fish's attention if it goes by. And you can tie this fly in all sorts of sizes and lengths. This is a size 1, and I would definitely try to make sure that you match the appropriate size dumbbell eye to the size hook you're using, and use the right amount of material, right? If I added just a little bit more material than this fly would not even turn over. So I could even probably sparse it down slightly even more just to help with it turn over a little bit easier. But again, it's just something to be mindful of, and you can tie this fly in small sizes all the way up to big old flies. Well, there we go, the Adachi Clouser. Fantastic fly. Shout out to Gene. Thank you so much for the recommendation. If you folks ever have any recommendations of flies or topics you'd like to see here covered on the channel, you can always feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Well, thank you so much to everyone who watches the videos, and thank you so much to our Twitch subs and YouTube members. Without you folks, I wouldn't be able to do this, and I appreciate all the support and all the new subscribers here watching the channel. Thank you so much. Well, my name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. We have new fly tying and fly fishing videos coming out every week. We have live fly tying on Friday nights and early access for members. Thank you so much again for watching. Have a great rest of your season out there this year, or a good start to your season now that it's winter time. Till next time, tight lines.